Thank you very much. Bonjour tout le monde. Bonjour. I was just at Willow's today, and I still have that, the French in me, so to speak. You know. Welcome everyone to our regular meeting of Council. And we start by acknowledging that we're gathering here in the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen speaking people known today as the Songhees Nation and the Esquimalt Nation. And that their historic connection to this land, which has been for the millennials, continues to this day. Also alert you to the fact that you're being recorded and live streamed right now, and then it will be recorded and archived if you ever want to see this programming again. It's like Netflix. It's a series, and you can binge on it. It may not be as exciting as some of the others. So we do have an agenda tonight, and we start with our minutes and reports of council, and that is October 10th.
Move approval.
Move to adopt. Thank you. Are there any corrections or changes or comments people want to make? Okay, seeing none, call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Now, similarly for the Committee of the Whole,
Move approval.
for October the 16th. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any corrections or discussion on any of that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. We go to my remarks, and in no particular order, I want to start by, since our last meeting, and I want to start by referencing the derelict boat cleanup that took place since then. And in particular, what I want to do is thank all the volunteers. This was a really multi-jurisdictional effort. We got monies from the provincial government. I think we had mostly moral support from the federal government, although our member of parliament was down there also, and lots of volunteers. The Cadboro Bay Residents Association, Veins of Life, and a lot of individuals showed up. But I particularly want to recognize 4 of our own employees who volunteered to come out that day with, they had equipment that we supplied, the municipality supplied, and the 4 of them spent the day down, and a very cold, rainy day it was. I can assure you from my own being there, I hadn't really come prepared for rain. How can you figure that, right? I went down there thinking, well, it's not going to rain. Well, it did. But there were 4 employees, Rob Catanus, Ian Kent, Becky Jurista, and our parks manager, Chris Hydley, who volunteered their time and their sweat equity, and we appreciate and recognize them for that. They did an incredible job, and 6 boats left the beach. One particular large one, which was cut into 3 bits. It was so big. So that is something that's really important for the environment along that stretch. Second one, I got a piece of wood in the mail. Well, typically that wouldn't be much of a story, except this one is from the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia, a lovely plaque that where they wish us 30 years. They're celebrating 30 years of the district being a charter member. So we thank them for that, and we'll find a lovely place to put that, I'm sure. 3, yes. Some of you may know that we've had these ongoing bridge building exercises, community to community, with the Songhees First Nations and the Esquimalt, and we applied for a grant for our recent meeting, and the UBCM sent us a note that we qualified, and we're grateful for that program for supporting us financially so we can hold these meetings. The bike registry launched this morning at about 7:30 as I walked in the door. Apparently I was the first one at Oak Bay Police Department to register our family's 3 bikes. And so I encourage everyone to get down there. You fill out a form. You have to search around for where the serial number in your bike is, usually on the crankshaft. It was on our 3 bikes. And they give you a little sticker that you could put on that warns any potential thief that the bike has now been marked. So it's a wonderful program, and it was in the workings for some time. And they launched it very coincidentally as a result of excellent police work that was done by Marcus Luder, who, after realizing that there were a number of bicycles stolen from Oak Bay High, set up, I guess, a situation where he would catch the perpetrator, alleged perpetrator. It's not been in court. So we want to make sure of that. So we thank him, but we thank the department for getting this organized, and it's a good way to ensure that if your bike is stolen and found, they know who you are. Because quite often they get bikes that have clearly been stolen, but they don't know who the owners are and they can't trace them. So I encourage everyone to do that. Fifthly, I want to let everyone know that very soon, in the near future, in the next little while, you will see on our website and in the newspaper announcements about openings on our commissions, boards, and committees, the CBCs. So if any of you who might be in the audience now is interested in volunteering their time, keep your eye on the Oak Bay News and or the municipal website, and there'll be a list of what the openings are. And there'll be things potentially like the Heritage Commission, the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission. We rotate people through there. So I encourage you to keep your eye on that. And lastly, in a similar vein, the provincial government has posted a vacancy for our Oak Bay Police Board. This consists of 4 members and myself as the ex officio chair. One of the appointments is municipal appointments. The other 3 are provincial appointments. One of them is coming to a 6-year end of term situation in December, so the province has posted that position, which they will then look at, and I think they do interviews and then select a person for our police board. So I encourage any of you who are interested to apply, and you feel free to contact me if you have some questions about what actually the police board does. And I think in the fullness of time, that link will also appear on our website that will direct you to the provincial website. So those are my remarks. Thank you very much. I see it's now 7:08. So for the next 20 minutes, we have a public participation period where we invite members of the public to come forward and speak to us on a particular issue relating to Oak Bay. And we would ask that you do a number of things. State your name, the municipality that you are in, and the topic of the remarks, just a kind of a headline. I will then welcome you, and as I welcome you, I will also start the 3-minute timer that people have 3 minutes to address us in that 20-minute period. And then also, too, you'll see a form. If you just, so we have the right spelling of your name and the right spelling of your municipality, if you can just fill that out. So, come forward, please, and identify yourself in your community.
Lena Malmquist, Oak Bay.
And your topic?
The Shorelines Development Permit Area.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Lena Malmquist, as I just told you. I'm a registered professional biologist who does a lot of work in several of the municipalities on shoreline developments. And I'm here to speak with you to follow up on a letter that was submitted to Council on October 4th by 12 concerned, knowledgeable Oak Bay residents about the implementation of the Shoreline Development Permit Area. As we know, the District of Oak Bay has exceptional biodiversity and natural heritage along its shorelines, and that this is at risk. We have historic and ongoing degradation that threatens the integrity of our shorelines and the Salish Sea. In 2014, this is why the OCP brought in the Shorelines Development Permit Area. Unfortunately, there has not been adequate implementation of the development permit area, and further degradation has resulted. We are here to encourage council to direct staff to do an expedient review and implementation of our recommendations to ensure we don't have a repeat of owners not knowing what their responsibilities are. For example, what happened at 383 King George Terrace. It may be possible that the recommendations could be implemented in stages to accommodate staff workloads. And this also doesn't need to be a huge task for staff. There's ample information available from many other municipalities in the CRD that have shoreline development permit areas that could easily be adapted for here. And there's several experts that live in the district that are willing and eager to help in this task. So we would also like to recommend that our letter is referred to the Advisory Planning Commission because some of the recommendations came from APC members that brought up ideas during that King George Terrace review. This is an important priority that needs to be a shared responsibility between staff and council, and we really want to urge you to take leadership on this. We would like you to recommend or request and direct staff to meet with us within the next month so that we can assist in developing the information packet to go out to landowners and to know that this, and for staff to know that they have knowledgeable residents at their disposal. We would also like to be invited back to speak when the staff report comes to council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Malmquist. Now, unfortunately, our director or acting director of building and planning is not here with us tonight. But right now, that piece of work is not on our priorities. That doesn't mean it can't come onto our priorities list, but it really would take a number of steps. And one step would be for a member of council bring a notice of motion to take us in that direction. And we have a protocol that the next step after that is that before we actually launch down that path is to ask staff, bring back a report. Oh, I have to stop talking. 3 minutes is up. I'm just kidding you. Then we ask our staff for a report in terms of how this fits with other priorities and how it can be fitted in, if you will, and if other priorities have to come off to make room for this. So we do have a very full agenda, not tonight, but generally. So I think that's what it would take. So we've heard you tonight. Yes, Ms. Koenig.
If I could just, there is one item that staff have actually pulled out of here because there's an awful lot that's being requested here. But particularly, I just want to draw your attention to staff are looking at the tools of education for applicants and to put something together. So we're actually not waiting for that. We're actually doing that as part of our day-to-day.
And that could be, it's obviously something you can fit in and, yeah.
Correct.
So that's at least one small step for Malmquist kind. So that's the process, Ms. Malmquist, okay? And we'll let the process take its steps, okay? Thank you very much. Since I took up some of your time, we'll add that time back on. They do that in soccer, as I can recall. Next speaker, please.
Anita Wolf, Oak Bay.
Welcome back, Ms. Wolf. I know you were on our Environmental Advisory Committee some years back. So
yeah, thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I haven't said welcome yet, but when I do, you'll have 3 minutes. And
Okay,
your
so
topic is?
Well, shoreline development permit
And your community is
application as well. And I'm in Oak Bay.
Okay.
And so I want to support, I was one of the
Okay,
signatories on that letter. First of all, I want to thank you for taking your time to, one, listen to us and do the important work you have. Oak Bay, as you know, has 3 amazing assets: the shoreline, the Garry Oak ecosystem, and their heritage. And I see that you're doing a lot of work already on your strategic priorities on those 2. And as you mentioned, Mayor Jensen, that is not a current strategic priority right now. However, as was mentioned, we are proposing an educational piece for owners, and along the way that staff would be involved in that too. So I want to support the motion. I just want to say a few things about that. It's a great opportunity. You have an army of professionals who are eager to really support this. We've seen where I live, which is a beach and transit, within 500 meters of where I live, there's been 6 developments in the last 3 years that have severely encroached on the ecological values, 3 terrestrially on the Garry Oak ecosystem and 3 on the shoreline, one currently being built and another one underway. So where I live, which is Chickawidge, McNeil Bay, the Lekwungen word for that is big hips, so I anchor it. But it's also apparently rocks falling off cliffs, and so the instability of the geology really has to be considered. And it's such a great opportunity because it does fit in with the tying in of the OCP implementation, ability to have staff supported by people in the community and with other municipalities who are eager to share and willing to share. We have 2 of our borders are on the shoreline, so we probably have proportionally more than any other municipality in CRDL, although I don't have my fact on that. And this would be, I think that there is an obligation to complete this through the OCP, as a completion of the OCP process, and to show leadership so that to demonstrate that this is, to do this proactively. I love that it can be fit in under an education tool. And it would also avoid your legal, financial, and ecological liabilities should anything happen, because ecological restoration is expensive. It's $200,000 just to think about it on a lot. So where there's been serious compromising of the integrity, we have federal and provincial acts on there. So I'm saying hooray, and let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wolf. I should say that for the last number of years, we have been putting monies aside for the erosion problem along part of McNeil Bay, and we're monitoring that on an ongoing basis. So that is a shoreline issue that we're dealing with. So thank you.
If I could just say, you should have seen it on Saturday, the storm surge.
Yeah. We can't hold back the ocean. None of us are King Canute. Anybody else, please? You still have to tell us your name.
Good evening, Jacques Sirois, Oak Bay. I would like to talk about the shoreline development permit area as well.
Bienvenue.
Yes. Very quickly, obviously, the shoreline is one of our greatest assets in Oak Bay, and we need to pay attention. I want to offer you to go on a boat tour. We need council and staff on a boat tour, see what is going on the shoreline. As a kayaker, I see this every day, and it's astounding. You need to see this. We even have an entire house on the beach in Uplands. Right? So as simple as that. There's very new homes that are completely encroaching on the shoreline, very new homes. So we need to start paying attention to this. And this is essentially what I want to. It takes less than 3 minutes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. Was the offer to go with you kayaking, or?
No, we should.
No.
We should go with a whale watcher.
Yeah,
I'm serious.
Some of us may not be kayakers.
We should go with a whale watcher from Gonzales Bay to Cadborough Bay, and I'm very serious. It would be extremely revealing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sirwell. Anybody else? Mr. Davies? Davis, sorry.
Thank you. My name is Richard Davis from Oak Bay. I live on Granite.
Okay, welcome.
I'm neighbours with you guys. I live just over there, the other side of the municipal park. So I would like to talk about the municipal park and the homeless situation. I moved to the area in June. In late July and August, I noticed homeless individuals were using the park just behind there to sleep on a sporadic basis. And then earlier in October, we had a tent city, a protest, a group of tents, at least probably around 9 or 10 tents for a week. I spoke to the mayor. I spoke to Deputy Police Chief Ray Benottis, I think. And we are coordinated between our local block watch. Obviously, we were not thrilled about this situation. However, we cooperated with the police and kept our complaints and interaction with the people there to a very small amount of we basically did nothing. I came and talked to you about it. And the points I wanted to make was that I feel that that particular park there is a very nice park for homeless people. It has toilets, it has facilities nearby, it's sheltered. And I think that is the case with several other parks now in Oak Bay, and they have indeed not kept their word and gone to Willows. So the situation continues for you guys. You probably, I believe, need to put a strategy in place for dealing with these sort of encampments. However, I would like to be proactive and suggest some changes for the small municipal park behind us. I would like to make it less friendly for people who want to sleep in it and more friendly for people who want to use it during the daytime. So that might mean some changes. Like a draconian change would be maybe creating it into a secure park with a fence that is closed at the night and opened at the day, but I'm not really comfortable with that. I think a more proactive way of getting more people into that park and making it as a difficult place for people to sleep in that park would be to landscape it where the lawn is now, to put in landscaping, rockeries, places where you cannot put up a tent and you also cannot sleep. And I think that would help encourage more people into the park. From what I've seen, it's lightly used. I see it in evenings during the summer and at weekends, and I don't see, right now it looks like me and the homeless people are the main users of the park. So I think you could kill two birds with one stone by redeveloping it to make it nicer and less attractive. And probably the third thing I am keen to see is I'm very keen to see how you deal with the situation at Willows. I don't know if anyone from Willows is here, but I'm sure I'm feeling for them right now because the tents are actually much closer to the accommodation than they were to my house.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Sorry. In terms of that park, we do have our liaison to the Commission, Parks, Recreation and Culture, so that's something that she can take for discussion to the parks, and something that can be looked at over time. Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. Thank you. Oh, this one's got to go down a little bit.
Yeah, the opposite. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. I can manage. Thanks a lot. Yeah. So my name is Sarf Ahmed. I am also a resident of Oak Bay, across the street on Granite Street, and I've been here for about 24 years in the same location. So, and the topic here is also the municipal park. And first of all, I want to compliment the council for a compassionate approach towards the homeless people who were here in this park and now at Willows. I think your approach was consistent with what Victoria did and Saanich did as well. However, I'm sure you're aware that there are some risks in case they don't decide to leave after 7 or 8 days or whatever the period is. So just like Richard, I would encourage you to have a strategy on this one. But on going back to the future use of this park, just like what Richard said, I think it's a very important piece of real estate in the Oak Bay Municipal Hall. Its location is ideal. I believe that it is underutilized right now, and we could do more with it on a go-forward basis. There could be many. Richard had some suggestions. I'm sure other people have other suggestions as well on what it could be done with it. But usage can be utilized much more than what it is. Plus, also it is, I think, especially during the winter season, it's also a safety issue. When there are people loitering around there with low visibility from the outside, and our neighbors and families and kids and women are walking through the alleyway. So I think the council needs to address that as well and make it safe and secure if anybody's wanting to use that pathway, especially during after sunset. So I would suggest is that perhaps either the Parks Committee or somebody takes into it and gets the residents involved to find out what are better uses for this park could be, whether it's a landscaped version or some other kind of thing, but anything which increases participation of the community on that very nice piece of land. Thank you.
Thank you, and please don't forget to put your name and print your name there so we can have the correct spelling. Thank you very much.
Do you have time for me?
Oh yeah, I think we started 7:08, and I added 2 minutes. I don't know, in soccer it's called injury time, but I think we would call it here mayor's babbling time or something like that. So, so I think you will be the last one, or you want one more than that. So if you could go close to 2.5 minutes, then we have 2.5 minutes for.
Okay. So this is my name's Curtis Hobson. I live on Granite Street.
Welcome.
Citizen of Oak Bay. Am I limited about what I can talk about, or this is my first time speaking?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I have 3 things. I was at the Committee of the Whole last week, and it was discussion about the bike lanes. And I would like to suggest to council that perhaps the cost could be, for future or for this bike lane project, could be broken down into cost per kilometer or cost per meter, and perhaps a percentage of the municipal budget, the cost for the bike lanes. So some back of the envelope calculations, excuse me, it's about $433 per meter or $866 per meter for both sides of the road. And that total cost in my back of the envelope calculations was 1.1% of the municipal budget. And again, you can probably do the math better than I can. My second point was I wrote a letter to the Oak Bay News a few weeks back. I'm not sure if you've read it, but it was about consultation with citizens. And perhaps I was a bit hasty and quick with the letter because I went back and watched the council session where the idea of the public forum was discussed. And I noticed that some councillors were concerned that the community had been over-consulted and perhaps there was consultation fatigue. And people want to be consulted, and then council thinks there's consultation fatigue. So perhaps there's a bit of a disconnect there between the ideas of the citizens and what council's feeling. And my third thing that I'd like to talk about is 2 problems that I'm aware of at Oak Bay. The lack of resources to implement the strategic priorities and the inadequacy of the grant from UVic. And they don't really seem connected, but possible win-win-win-win solution could be if the provincial government, UVic, and municipalities with educational institutions could all get together. UVic could provide knowledge-based capital instead of money for their grants, in the sense that the strategic priorities that are farther down the list and Oak Bay doesn't have staff available to work on, perhaps those could be crowdsourced along with the community, like some people have mentioned here. We have a lot of expertise in Oak Bay. And there's a lot of expertise up at UVic as well. So the win would for the students and involved would be they'd get to work on real world problems and a real world solution. The win for Oak Bay would be a lot of the work that's done by consultants or staff could be taken care of, supervised by the experts at UVic, and the students could work on that. So that would be the win for the students. The win for Oak Bay would be that we would get some stuff done.
Okay, I just asked you to wrap up.
Sure, I'm gonna. Please. The win for the for UVic would be that they would morally come out on top by providing knowledge-based capital instead of money.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to finish one last thing. The win for the province would be is that they wouldn't have to go to the municipalities and say, no, we can't raise the grant, and UVic wouldn't have to pay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you. Last speaker now. Did you write your name down? Not, I think you said your name was Thompson. Sorry, was that?
There's a son in it, but that's
Hobson. Oh, okay. Well, you wrote your name down then, because I heard it a little differently. Hobson. Okay, thank you. you. Ms.
Hi.
Butler?
My name's Diana Butler, and I live on Granite Street. What I want to talk about tonight is the neighborhood in general.
Welcome.
I feel like my neighborhood in which I've lived for 40 years is under siege. As you know, the United Church is considering a major redevelopment of its property with significant density increases in a predominantly single-family area. And so far, there has been no two-way collaborative discussion about what the neighborhood feels would be appropriate and what the church wants. Instead, it looks like they are steaming ahead, preparing plans that they will ask us to react to rather than engaging us before the plans are drawn up. We know that on at least 3 occasions there have been attempts to assemble properties for redevelopment to higher density in our area, not including the church. After a decade or more of asking for a parking and traffic study in the South Village area, Council agreed in 2014 to a parking study. Such a study should normally take about 6 months, but it has been 3.5 years. Now we understand that the November Committee of the Whole meeting, some proposals might be coming forward, and we welcome those, I think, because we don't know what they are, but we do understand they involve only a portion of Granite Street. Despite the fact that the problems involve the whole street, we still have not had any commitment to addressing traffic issues on Granite except for the speed limit, which is more or less effective or ineffective, and particularly the issue of truck traffic. For years, people have been sleeping in the park behind the municipal hall, and little or nothing has been done. Last week, the situation escalated, and a tent encampment was set up in the park. I know it was taken down after 8 days, but it is entirely possible it could occur again. Action needs to be taken to ensure this doesn't happen. I sympathize with the plight of the homeless, but it is clear that more effort is needed to find solutions here and in the wider community. Council needs to become more proactive instead of merely reacting to every situation that arises after the fact. You need to anticipate and focus on what is happening, particularly in this neighborhood. You need to decide upon a course of action and actually follow through expeditiously. I don't know if you are aware or not of the growing frustration that is out there. As I talk to my neighbors, I have certainly become aware of it, the extent to which has been surprising to me. Maybe you have a different vision for this neighborhood. If so, please let us know and put us out of our misery. If not, it is time to demonstrate some goodwill towards and concern about this particular neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Butler. Thank you. That ends our participation period. But I was reminded by Mr. Hobson about some meetings that we had, and I meant to mention that there's a consultation by our municipal police force on the 30th of October at 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock that day on their strategic plan, and I should have mentioned that on there. So, okay. We're going to move on now, please. The next order of business is the strategic plan update report from our Chief Administrative Officer. This is one that we get on an ongoing basis. Ms. Koning, could you take us through and highlight some of these for us, please?
I would be happy, Your Worship. Actually, there's a couple of them that I will defer to our Director of Engineering. So, but just kind of going through, we are actually feeling quite good about the fact that several of these initiatives are underway. I will leave the one about the DCCs and the community amenity contribution for Mr. Haran. I would like to just talk about, we've got a Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy program, and I've been advised by our Director of Corporate Services that a consultant has been hired, and there will be some training that will be happening towards the end of November, beginning of December, and there will be an hour session that will be provided to Council during that time. We are still anticipating updating our corporate purchasing policy, but that's moved to 2018, so that's not on the docket at the moment. Our deer management strategy, we're still in process with the UWSS. Staff are talking with the UWSS and anticipate an update for Council in the near future. Carnarvon Park, the plan is in process. The urban forest strategy, we've developed a phased implementation plan, and you'll see a little bit more about that during the budget process, and how that will, the first section of the implementation would be rolled out, and that would be for council to discuss further. The Turkey Head parking lot bylaw, as you know, we've completed that. I will leave the asset management plan for Mr. Haran, as well as the subsequent ones around the developing and maintaining our infrastructure. Moving forward to our partnership with the regional district on the derelict boats, and you had referred to that earlier. So we consider that phase actually completed. We continue to do our relationship building with the First Nations, and I wasn't sure if you had actually mentioned during your remarks that the display that we had here this August will actually be going up, a section of that will be going up to the Oak Bay High School. And so we're really quite pleased that that actually has found another home. And so that will be happening shortly. The cenotaph renewal, I was advised by the Director of Corporate Services that staff are working on a spring matching grant. So we had some funds that were allocated, and we're anticipating through the budget process to have those moved to the spring so that we can apply for a Veterans Affairs grant. So that's in process. And as you so aptly talked about, we've had the Heritage Conservation Area established its inaugural meetings with its working group, which I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about. But I think the rest of the updates, if I might, to suggest that Mr. Haran speak to.
Okay, over to you, Mr. Haran.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. For the first one, the development of the implementation of a development cost charge bylaw and community amenity contribution policy, we retained a consultant, that would be Urban Systems. So now it's a joint effort between Building and Planning Department, Engineering Services, and the consultant, focusing first on the community amenity contribution policy, followed by identifying infrastructure needs tied to growth and further feasibility study work for the development cost charges portion. So the aim is before Christmas to come back and brief council on progress in that work. Next, in terms of preparing an asset management plan, there was quite a lot of material presented to Committee of the Whole back in March, providing condition assessment and expected impact to end-of-life planning for municipal facilities such as buildings and infrastructure, sewer, storm, water, and roads. So that was a good foundation to base our asset management work moving forward. So the next steps are November Committee of the Whole, provide council with a more concise summary of the state of assets, initial risk assessment related to those assets, and staff recommendations about council decisions on infrastructure moving forward. And then the next three in the list on the strategic priorities, Uplands Combined Sewer Separation Project, well underway with detailed design of the Humber catchment. Water supply redundancy, the Henderson Water Main project is on schedule, well underway as well. And finally, as you saw last week, we're making progress on Cadbro Bay bike lanes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haran. I think what we're going to do now, we're looking eventually for a motion to receive this report, but let's start to see if there's any questions of staff. Yep, Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, staff, for an excellent report, and I very much appreciate the opportunity that we and the public have a chance to find out what you're so busy doing day by day. I very much appreciate this as you're working away so hard on some of these very large items. I wanted to ask about an item that I'm not sure whether it's even on our strategic priorities, but it is an item that has been around for some time. And it has, if there's anything you could possibly share with any movement that's been done with respect to the 2 vacant homes and the possible renting out of those. I'm not sure if it's in one of these items, if it's a subset, but if you could just share whatever you can about that, please.
I can, Your Worship, through you, Your Worship. I spoke with our Director of Corporate Services today about that, and he advises that there will be a staff report coming, I think, in November. So you'll get some further insight. And just, that's not actually a strategic priority. I think it was one of those things that kind of fell on as an add-on, has just become part of the day-to-day.
Anything else, Councillor Zelko? Thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Murdoch, please.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. One, someone just conversation before the meeting started. Where, I guess to Ms. Carter, where is the there was a policy look at on reserves and so forth. That was we had a report come back, and is that still one of the expected deliverables to sort of look at our reserve policy and so forth coming back?
Through your worship, yes, it is still on my radar. Unfortunately, it hasn't got to the top of my list, but it certainly hasn't dropped off, and I'm aware of the importance of that, so hoping to bring it forward as soon as possible.
If I may, just is that expected sort of through, like, sort of at the same time or before the budget process? So we'd have that information as part of our budget awareness, or do you not link those two together?
Through your worship, in a perfect world, yes, we would bring that forward around the same time or just before. We've been doing some homework and have gathered lots of information, but unfortunately, due to reduced resources over the last few months, haven't been able to get to it, so it's not likely that it will come forward before budget.
Okay, thank you. And the other, I guess, sort of a question, maybe more of a comment. The letter that was raised today in the public participation period about the foreshore protection and so forth, it had a number of interesting points in there. So I certainly, it may be good for us to get an update in the next while about sort of where that's at. I don't think it's worth adding it to a priorities piece, but I think it's very heartening to hear staff say that that's sort of being actively worked on and so forth. So perhaps in the next few months, if there's some information back for that, that would be just something to be nice to get as one of our updates back to the council.
Ms. Coney?
We can, your worship, but as I mentioned, we're working on a couple of specific components, not all of them, and so I can also give you an update probably in November about specifically what what staff is working on.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate, no, definitely not everything in that letter. There's a lot of stuff in there, but that one, educational portion is good. Thank you very much. That's all I had.
Thank you, Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Kirby? Yes, thank you.
I just wanted to ask about the Carnarvon Park plan. The first item or under the actions is to undertake community engagement and a planning process for future priorities, amenities, and uses for Carnarvon Park. I haven't seen any notices of public engagement that are about to take place, but I'm just wondering if that's happened and I missed it, or if you have any information about when the consultation might take place.
So through your worship, there isn't sort of a formalized process. It's just being kicked off at a staff level. So I think they're actually planning it out. They've spent a considerable amount of time working on a number of other issues. The biggest one, of course, was the urban forest strategy. So they were just trying to get that one processed through the budget. But I can have Mr. Herman provide a bit more context and an update.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Croft, please.
Thank you. I appreciate the report and I appreciate the verbal narrative, but I was wondering if possible some of that verbal narrative could be included in the report in the future. I know that means more work for you, but it gives us a chance to digest what you might say here ahead of a meeting. I found that the report was great, but I don't know whether or not there's a possibility to do that. And I don't want to make a whole bunch more work. I appreciate the verbal, but I know the public might appreciate a bit more of what was heard here tonight.
Staff have considered that. Right now it is an extra piece of work. I mean, we did sort of some discussion today to do a quick update. I can go back and it'll be sort of in point form, I think, if we're able to do that. It won't be probably, it'll be more eloquent than me speaking to you. How's that?
Through you. I'm not expecting you to do that now of this report. I think that if we're possible in the future, I don't want you to go back and do work that you've just done tonight. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded to receive. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Heritage Commission.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay. Any questions on any of this bit? Any questions on any of these things? No? I'm going to... we're ready? Okay. Motion? on the floor? We're ready. No further discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Number 8, no correspondence, no action necessary. Number 9, new business and verbal reports. I'm going to start with a bit of new business to do with the report that we had from our Capital Regional District CRD, excuse me. We our last council meeting, we had the Chief Administrative Officer and the Chief Financial Officer here, and there were some series of questions that I asked about the Arts Commission and arts grants. And tonight I'm going to suggest that we may, as a council, want to have our CRD representative on the Arts Commission, Councillor Ney. We may want to ask her to open the discussion at that commission in her role as our representative, and centered a discussion on review of the equitable and fair way to collect the funds for the art grants, and perhaps a more open way to ensure that funds are distributed to local arts groups in all the participating municipalities. I'm going to expand a little bit here and just see if there is a consensus. What came out of that meeting that we had with the CAO and CFO was making it clear that we spend nearly $250,000 on the arts through the CRD. That's made up of $214,000 for the arts grants and $54,000 to the Royal Theatre. So a total of $268,000 that we are collecting, and it's being requisitioned from our taxpayers. So, we've been involved for some time, but since this whole thing got going, there's been a lot of changes in our community, and there may be a time to revisit where we stand vis-a-vis funding and distribution. So I don't need to tell you that at the time that all this went through, we didn't have the vibrant arts community in Oak Bay that we do now. We have Arts Alive. We have the sculpture purchases that we put money aside for, music in the park. We've added culture to Parks and Recreation. We've even hired a part-time culture coordinator. And again, at the time that the CRD got going, they had a fairly small bureaucracy, which they're intending now to grow a little bit. And I think that all comes together to say these are different times. These and other changes really should prompt us to ask two questions. One about the funding of how the money is gathered, and the other is how it's distributed. In terms of the how it's gathered, we may want to look at and have a discussion or a dialogue have the Arts Commission have the dialogue about the level and the nature of our contribution and how it relates to what we're spending on arts here and what we're in our community and what we're spending at the Royal, for instance. And we also may want to look at the issue of distribution. Right now, there are currently 3 types of contributors to the Arts Commission Arts Grants. There's 8 of the 13 communities pay in as follows. We are considered 100% part of the contribution, as are Victoria, Saanich, Esquimalt, and View Royal. But because of the formulation of how money is collected, there's quite a disparity in how that money is collected. So the City of Victoria, just under $1 million they contribute. Esquimalt, just over 100,000. We pay just over 214. District of Saanich is a little over $1 million, and View Royal is down at $93,000. That's what they call the Group 1 contributors. Then there's Group 2 contributors, one of whom is voluntary, and that's Sydney. They pay $15,000 a year. District of Metchosin, they're 30% contributors, meaning 30% of what their formula would have been. They pay $13,000, a little over, And District of Highlands, which are also 30% contributors, they pay $6,500. So a total collected of $2.44 million in 2017. So it is interesting to note that the City of Victoria has a budget 10 times as big as ours, but in terms of how they contribute to the arts and to this, there's only 4 times as much as ours. So there are some questions that maybe need to be discussed and looked at. So that's how money gets in, and how is it distributed? That may be another area that we wish to start a dialogue on. And the money is distributed in 2 ways. There's some operating grants that go to established arts organizations for programming and administrative expenses, and there's project grants, and that's for emerging and established arts. But what's of interest is Oak Bay has a lot of arts organizations locally that not all are enjoying the benefits of this arts distributions for a variety of policy reasons. So it may be time to look at those policy reasons and to see if there isn't room in there for us to strengthen arts in the arts in Oak Bay. And I make reference to things like Boca Creek Brush Up, the Oak Bay Arts Council that supports our Arts Laureate and working on the Arts Alive program, singing groups. And even, I mean, you could even say that the woodworking group over at Monterey is an arts group in that they create wonderful applied art. So the question is, why would we be doing it now? And there's a number of reasons we may want to open that discussion. First of all, we need here in Oak Bay, and we see that as we're moving forward, we need to support and strengthen our contribution to the local arts in Oak Bay. And there's many groups, and some of them I just mentioned, that I think could benefit. We could perhaps buy more art and certainly expand our services. And I think it's quite clear there's been a growth, a significant growth in art activities here in our community. So I think this is a good time to look at it. The other reason is we know that City of Victoria is embarking on a review of the Royal McPherson relationship. Another reason is the CRD is about to bring more staff into the arts area. Sydney is considering withdrawing, and as we all know, there's tight budgets everywhere. So that's why I propose that that we ask our representatives to open the dialogue, and that's all it would be at this time, centered on funding and distribution. So there's lots of questions around funding. Is there a better, more equitable way than the current 100%, 30%, and Sydney is at 14%? Is there a better way to do that? Should our contribution to the Royal be considered part of our 100% contribution? And is there a better way to recognize what we are contributing locally to the art scene? Should that be taken into account when we look at how much Oak Bay is funding? Then there's the distribution side, as I mentioned, and the question is, how can Oak Bay local groups have easier and better access and fairer access to the distribution programs? I guess the question is, why shouldn't our local groups be funded? And maybe it's a matter of reviewing some of these policies to ensure that they do qualify. So there's lots there. This is not something that's going to happen in one meeting, but if we don't start the review and the dialogue at some point, we'll not have that opportunity. And we don't want to be, and we want to be proactive as opposed to reactive, and we want to be very positive. This is about strengthening the arts support, and not only in the region, but in particular here in Oak Bay. We've benefited significantly since the Arts Laureate has taken on the role of raising profile. And so it is a conversation that hasn't been had, at least certainly in my recollection, in terms of the relationship between the municipalities, and it appears to be happening in other places. So Sydney, as I mentioned, is reviewing their status, and it may well be that they withdraw, or it may well be that they want to go to 30% or 100%. So I think this is a good time to start that conversation, and I wanted to see if there was others around the table how they felt, and whether or not this was an idea worth pursuing. All right, Councillor Kirby.
Thank you. When you mentioned that there are projects in Oak Bay, or there's a need in Oak Bay for funding, I think of our contribution of the community theatre, the Dave Dunnett Community Theatre, that has somebody to manage that theatre when the school is open. But when the school is not open, the theatre lies dormant, and that was not the intent of the Neighborhood Learning Center. It was meant that the school would constantly be in use, that all aspects of that building would be in use 365 days of the year and not lie dormant in the summer as schools do. So I see that there is a need for a programmer or somebody to be able to run a box office for our theater, because there's a need for that to have some more use, and I know that there's a need for stage space throughout the summer. There were several people have mentioned to me that there could have been concerts in that space all summer, and yet there was no one to program the space or allow anyone in. So I think that's one example of how our circumstances have changed, and we have provided through our $1 million grant a facility that should be used by the public at all times. So I would support that the initiative to look at this funding model.
And we do have Glenna Garamond, I think is her name. She's part-time, and that could be, again, something that, a role that could develop into that very thing that you talk about, because I know a number of community groups here are holding concerts there. We have fundraisers for the high school and stuff, but I think there's plenty of room to grow. Councillor Murdoch, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I know this is sort of quickly mentioned in the past, but I haven't had a chance to sort of put my head around it. A couple of things. One, the total amount being spent here is 1% of our taxes. So if we're receiving 10% of that or something, it's not a massive amount. I know that the overall cost of the CRD and all the services that we get is about half of the taxes that we collect. And it's going to have many of the same constraints. Are we getting value for the money and so forth? We talked about having a services review, and we opted not to do that in the last time that was brought up. So I don't have an inherent objection, I guess. I think that the approach, I think any group that you go to and say, we're thinking about taking away a bunch of our money and we'd like you to start spending more of your money with us, is probably bound to fail horribly, as their backs would automatically get up and not listen to the second part of that statement very easily. But I think there's probably the broader question, certainly at the CRD, is going to be around the funding models. We have, I think, and we're, I guess, in many ways victims of our own decisions here, but the formula used, where it's a mixture of population and assessment, is coming back to haunt us. It was one of the things I'm going to mention in my piece in the library. I mean, the net effect of that, I don't know what it's going to look like for our CRD contributions this year. It's going to have a massive impact with these large increases to Oak Bay's assessments. The average increase for the library is 2.9%. Oak Bay's is going up 10.6% because it's a mix of assessments and so forth. So as a bearer of cost as a regional basis, it's a major issue. And so this is part of that, but it's a small part of it. And I think that question, if it's going to be raised, probably has to be done at the big table, not at the small table. Because I don't think it's going to have much impact at the small table. It's going to really have an impact if we can change it at the big table. So those are my thoughts.
But I mean, your point about our assessments going up significantly higher property values than the rest of the community actually then shifts more burden to us. And I would think chewing it or trying to bite it off at the big table might be more difficult and more challenging. But if you start small in some areas, that may be one way to raise the issue. But I don't think there's a perfect way one way or the other. But your point's very well made. Councillor Braithwaite, did you want to say something?
Sure, thank you. I think it was me who actually brought up the difference between the amount that we give to the arts for the CRD and I was comparing it to the amount that we give to housing, and that was the comparison that I was looking at. So basically, we give $260,000 to the arts, and we give about 1/5 of that to housing within the CRD. And where I was wanting us to look at that money that we give to the arts was, why would we not redirect some of that money towards the housing in the CRD? Because to me, that's even though I want to strengthen and support arts within our community and within the CRD, I think at this time, and even from the speakers that we heard tonight, it's more important for us to look at ways that we can help for housing within the CRD. So I'm taking a little bit of a different take on it, like redirect some of that money, perhaps not give as much into the arts, but perhaps redirect it into the housing.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. I have the figure here. Regional Housing Trust Fund is 66,000, and versus total arts is 268,000. So it's 202,000 more, and but it may not be a simple matter of just redirecting. But that could be the consequence of what we do. We could say, we want to. I mean, one option might be to be a different level of contributor on one, but a higher on the other. So, but unless you start the dialogue, you're not going to be able to get that. No? Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Nave, you are a representative.
I am.
You've been at that table.
Yeah,
what do you,
I have been sitting at that table for a few years, and I think, given the funding formula, as Councillor Murdoch has just reviewed, it's worth having a run through to see whether the way we're funding has got out of proportion compared to our regional neighbors. And that's perhaps worth asking, for a review of that and see what those numbers look and see whether it's contributed some significant disparity for Oak Bay. And I mean, there are other considerations besides the funding formula. For example, how much patrons from citizens in Oak Bay are patrons of these events and venues is another issue in terms of addressing the issue of fairness. And so that probably will be part of the discussion. But one of the issues at the CRD is the council's aware of, there was a strategic plan review over the last year, and there was significant consultation throughout the region. It's a big, fat, thick a report in 2 volumes, and but the bottom line is that it articulated the mandate of the arts in the region, and that is to support, to promote, and to celebrate the arts. And each of those indicators was given sort of a report card. And on the indicator of supporting the arts, the community and the consultants came up very high. So the funding that's being provided right now, about $2.5 million almost, serves our region very well. We have lots of community groups. We have the Belfry, the Symphony, the opera, tons of theaters, and lots of grassroots organizations have opportunities to fund their projects and the operating expenses. Where the region doesn't do well is on the other two, the promoting and the celebration. So the promoting takes up your point, Mr. Mayor, where you're saying, like, many people who are involved in the arts in our community don't know what what applications they can apply for, whether they're eligible, when the funding dates are. And many people in the community also don't know when the events that are funded are happening. So we don't do well as a region in promoting the funding or the events to other arts communities, and we don't do well on celebrating the events. And what they mean by celebrating is it's about bringing the different arts groups together so that they can create economies and of scale, of for their events, as well as synergies between one another. And it said that that would be very helpful in this community. So most recently, as you know, they hired a coordinator, and there's questions about how that happened. But that was what that person is intended to do, is to address and bring forward the promotion and celebration of the arts in the region. So my concern here is that I think it's worth having a review of the equity of the funding model here, and whether that is fair for Oak Bay. But the idea of pulling back on our contribution, like deliberately pulling back on that to give to another cause, I would have I wouldn't be able to support that. I'm not suggesting that's where we're going, but one of our councillors has just mentioned that as a possibility. And the reason is that could contribute to a snowball effect. If the other core municipalities, Victoria, Esquimalt, Saanich, and View Royal, started to do the same, which they could, one person starts to reduce, others start reducing, and then this indicator that we actually do well on in terms of supporting the arts will start to go down. And there's no reason really to be doing it. We're doing very well on that point. So I would have concerns if that's where we're going, and I would certainly advocate that we keep the pot full because it's being well used. So those are my thoughts, and a sort of report back to you about some of the work that's been going on at that commission. But if it is the will of the council, I'm happy to go back and have an ask of the commission around the funding and the distribution of funds currently.
These kind of views in any event I think are good for an organization who may have become kind of encrusted and kind of lost sight on some of their goals. I mean, just if we could review the distribution, I think that would benefit us. Maybe there is a room to distribute it in such a way that the Dave Dunnett Community Theatre is supported, or the Brush Up is supported, or singing groups and choirs that need funding. Maybe there is that. So it strikes me that that what I hear from you is that you think there's value in going and talking and opening a dialogue about equity of funding, and also the equity of distribution, and what, if any, policies stand in the way of a wider distribution. And if there's a sense around this table that we'd like that, then I think, I don't know if we need a motion per se, but for you to start that dialogue, I think would be very helpful. Councillor Kirby, then Councillor Murdoch, please.
I just wanted to follow up just that to express my support for the idea of opening the discussion, not necessarily in reducing the funding, because I think having just experienced on Yagan on Saturday night at the Belfry Theatre, which was a fantastic show, and I highly recommend everybody book your tickets now before it closes on November 12th. It was fantastic. I got to go there with my kids. I'm going to see Gordon Lightfoot tomorrow night at the Royal Theatre, and there's other events that we are so lucky to have access to in this region. And because we collaborate and we work across borders to make sure that those amazing facilities are available to the arts community, and that we support those grassroots community organizations that bring us these amazing productions and give our kids opportunities to access the arts. We are very blessed to have that. Having grown up in a rural community, we did not have access to that, and so I feel the riches of this environment are incredible. So I don't want to see a reduction in that, and if we need to put more money towards the Regional Housing Trust Fund, I would support that, but I don't think it should come at the cost of the arts.
I think in terms of how the new formula would look like, if there even is a new formula, maybe it wouldn't be based on assessment. I don't know what that's going to look like, but until you start initiating that discussion, there's going to be no changes. And I think from Oak Bay's point of view, there is areas that could be changed, that could benefit everybody, CRD and OPE. Councillor Murdoch, and then Councillor Croft.
Thank you, through Chair. I think, it's interesting. I think this is in many ways the same spur the Arts Commission looked to hire a new staff person, as I understand it, right? And that was sort of driving some of the costs, and this realization that this was sort of growing without oversight or without control. And I know that the initial service review that was requested from some of the West Shore communities was the same issue, where they were told by the CRD that, no, we can cover these few $100,000 because we have all these people who are not underutilized that we can just move over into this role. And then people are rightly saying, well, wait a second, why are we adding more people? Why are we doing these things? And if they're underutilized, should we not be doing a broader picture? So I think, it just in terms of going back to this group and Director Councillor Ney will be Director Ney at the meeting there. I trust her to speak wisely on this. But I think certainly, just facing up to those kind of these sort of little incremental adding of people and so forth to things that aren't, if they're not directly benefiting the role that body is supposed to play, I think we have to really seriously look at that and look to the rest of the CRD to possibly help cover some of those costs out of their broader pool of employees.
Thank you. And in fact, hiring that staff person is what alerted me, so to speak, because when they did it midterm, where they took the funding from was money that was supposed to go to the arts groups. And I just did not think that was right. I voted against it. I said, let's do the appropriate protocol and process to determine the exact level of FTEs. But it was done in midterm. And as a result, arts groups are going to lose some of their funding. So that's not right either. So I think there is, every organization can benefit from these kind of healthy and open discussions. So, Councillor Croft.
Yeah, to the Chair, I would agree, and I liken this to the review that's being done right now started by the City of Victoria on the funding of the RMTS, or its future, how the ownership was going to be. There's a very similar kind of thing, except it's arts. They're kind of related, and I think it's a great opportunity to do a review of how the arts are funded in this community.
Okay. So I think there's a consensus that you'll start the dialogue, and then you can report back to us how that dialogue is going. And at some point, if we have to take particular positions around this table to send messages, I think we can do that. So this has been a very good discussion. I appreciate the input that we've had here, and we look forward to the unfolding of the narrative of the play that will be the Arts Commission play. Thank you. We go on. Oh, no, we stay in new business. Any other new business? Okay, new business? Yep, go ahead. Oh, that's old business. Okay, so that's kind of under verbal reports. There's no report from the CRD. There's not been a meeting. And other verbal reports. Now, Councillor Croft, please.
Thank you, Mayor. In September, the Mayor's Task Force on Community Engagement was charged to report back to the Committee of the Whole on October 17th with a plan for a public forum. Unfortunately, we had the UBCM, and then one of our members was away from October 3rd to October 11th, so we really didn't have a chance to meet to flesh out what our public forum would look like. We have now met, and we intend to bring forward in November. It sounds like it's going to be a big agenda in November, but we would like to bring forward in the Committee of the Whole in November not only a draft report from the Mayor's Task Force on community engagement, but also a proposal for Council to consider on what the community engagement would look like, or what the public forum would look like. So I just needed to bring you up to date, and we do apologize that we're behind schedule, but we're hoping to get this done.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I know Councillor Zelko's on that committee, and Jan Mears also. So we thank you for your continuing work on that, and we look forward to November. Next, Councillor Zelko.
Is this an appropriate place for a notice of motion?
Well, I suppose it is at this point, but I think there's some other reports. Can we do the other reports? Because I know there's an HCA report I've asked Councillor Murdoch, and then when we're finished, all these other reports will come back to you. Okay, that'd be okay. I know Councillor Murdoch and who's chairing the HCA working group. We had two very good meetings over the last week, one on Thursday and one on Saturday. So I've asked him to kind of bring us a little up to date as to where we are, including what are the timelines that we're looking at for the variety of steps. Because one of the things that came out of Mr. Miller's presentation, which was a very good one, I might add, very informative, was lots of points where you turn to the public, lots of points where you have that public engagement. And I don't know if, I know the committee met, the working group met, but I don't know if you're in a position to talk about timelines yet. So I'll turn it over to you. Bring us up to date, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, quick update. So the two presentations were actually very well attended, which is very nice to see. A lot of interest in the community, a lot of interest in broader heritage issues than just the heritage conservation area that was being discussed specifically. But those are all being, those are all also help inform the overall process. So what's happened is that we had our initial meeting. Obviously, just being an initial meeting, we should have set up some of the ground rules for their group and trying to find a regular meeting time and all those kind of housekeeping pieces. Timelines that we have right now, we've committed to bringing back to this to the council a work plan. So what that's going to look like is sort of a timeline, our goal, a center timeline, and really. One of the big things that we have to struggle with a little bit is how do we get this process to be expedient but comprehensive, have enough time for public consultation and input, but still get back to this body in a timely fashion. And so some of the big questions driving that are really around like how we're going to use a consultant. Are we going to use just a technical consultant? Are we going to use a consultant to kind of guide the process? All those kind of questions. So we have not decided those yet, but that we are planning a meeting at least once in the next week or two. Maybe twice if we need to, and to have a report in so that I can get onto the November 8th agenda if that's possible. And really, I think would be a high-level work plan that would be for council approval, and that would allow us to go forward with an RFP process and so forth.
Excellent.
And I guess the other thing I should, since I'll do it in my official point as representing the library, that just a heads up on the budget piece for that. There is, as a result of that calculation formula, because Oak Bay's assessments went up so much and so much more than other jurisdictions, the net impact on the increase to Oak Bay, well, it's not a large amount in overall numbers. You really see it, and I think it's a real foreshadowing to what it's going to look like for when we get our CRD bill coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else? No, that was that. Okay, anything else? Any other reports? Okay, so now we'll go back to you, Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be providing the final wording to staff, so there's no need to go crazy to write it down, and I'm sure my wording will be a bit rough anyway. This has to do with, in the area of development permit areas, whereas we have a number of natural environment development permit areas that are to protect the environment in balance with increased development, and whereas as we intensify, we're finding more and more development moving into less and less prime areas to develop. And whereas we have situations that have shown up, such as the shoreline development permit area that has shown to be needing some refinement, and thankfully staff is moving and to refine that development permit area. And we've also seen some work in the watercourses development permit area. However, we also have another development permit area referred to as the hazardous conditions development permit area. And whereas this development permit area is designed to protect the environment and protect development from hazardous conditions, in particular with respect to geotechnically unstable lands. Unfortunately, this particular development permit area is restricted to a particular area that I believe is referred to as just north of where is it? It's It's described as the area of Oak Bay north of the Royal Victoria Yacht Club and east of Beach Drive. Therefore, the crux of the notice of motion is to ask Building and Planning to lead a staff review of this hazardous conditions development permit area to find a way to make it more generally applicable to hazardous conditions as are found in other parts of Oak Bay. That's the fundamental aspect of it.
Okay. So at some point then, that's going to engage the protocol that we have in terms of priorities. So, but only if a council has a desire to go down that road. So it'll come back once you've worked it out and cleaned up the language, as you said you would. We'll come back a first meeting in November, and depending on what the discussions there, it may or may not invoke the protocol of adding another priority. So that would be the step. So thank you very much for that notice. Anything else? Yes, go ahead, please.
Just to clarify, I wouldn't be proposing another priority. I would be proposing simply a staff review, similar to the reviews that are happening on the other development permit areas, not a priority. That's not what this notice of motion is about.
Okay, I think we're going to probably ask staff to weigh in as to can this fit within their current workload, and that's not something we can need to even look at tonight, because we'll have to ask council once we see the actual contours of the motion, and perhaps you can share that in advance with staff, so when it does come to us, staff have some idea of this will fit in to everything we do stuff every day. This will have to be special. This is the amount of time, et cetera, et cetera. You know, just kind of give us heads up. Okay. So I think we're all on the same page there. Thank you very much. That's it for that portion. I don't see any other hands. We move on to, there's two resolutions. First resolution is the Local Government Leadership Academy.
Move approval. Seconded.
Thank you very much. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Councillor Murdoch's motion that he gave notice of, I think last time we met, and it's now before us. So perhaps the way we can do this is if you wanted to make the motion, Councillor Murdoch, and we'll have it seconded. We can see, I know staff might be ready to say talk a little bit about this, and then we can discuss the motion. Okay.
Sure. So motion is, I'm not going to read the whereases. No. Therefore be it resolved that the CRD post-2006 sewer debt costs be allocated in the following manner: 30% on taxes and 70% on water consumption, where water consumption is calculated at the 60% or 100% in accordance with the current practice.
Second.
Moved and seconded, so it's on the floor now. Now I know Ms. Carter put something together, maybe to assist our understanding, and we need our glasses, I guess. From where I sit, that's awful small.
Can I just interject?
Okay, yes, please.
Just on process, in terms of, we don't normally do this, but it was in anticipation of our Director of Finance being away in November, and actually trying to get this discussion at the council table in preparation for the actual setting of the rates.
Okay, thank you. So see, hang on, the setting of the rates, that's what you mentioned? Yes. Okay, and I meant to actually ask Ms. Jones to pull up the initial motion that we had some time ago when it came forward. And see, I thought that motion was that we would not change the rates. We would go with the current structure until next year. But I didn't get a chance to ask you that, Ms. Jones, and I apologize for that. Does anyone have an independent recollection of what that motion was? I don't know, because I think it involved a similar kind of approach. Councillor Murdoch, maybe you can shed some light on it.
I'll shed some light, because it was sort of a stutter step process. Not quite a two-step, but not quite a one-step. We initially, there was a report at a committee of the whole that came to this body, and we considered that report, which was just around the background of the the rates and how they could be applied and so forth. And at that time, there was some discussion about pros and cons and so forth. But at that point, it was decided that it probably wasn't, there wasn't enough information there to kind of make, I hadn't prepared a motion. Nobody else had either to kind of make a change in policy. So we had discussion that informed things, but no motion. So at that point, recognizing the tight timelines, if we wanted to get a full report, that would take months and so forth. So that was left. However, on sober second thought on that, I thought, well, sometimes these things kind of just linger, and it may be easier just to have a firm motion with an understanding of the impact of that. And so that's what I made the notice of motion last time, and that's what this is. So this is a firm motion to change the rate allocation for this time around.
For this year?
For 2018.
Okay. Yeah, for 2018. Okay, I just didn't maybe I misunderstood that, because I thought we'd tacitly maybe agreed that whatever rate change that came from the original discussion wouldn't be till 2019. But okay, so we have this motion in front of us. So now, is there any way you can make that a little bigger? Is it?
Would like.
Okay. So I think the answer right now is you're not going to make it much bigger. Yeah, she'll have to do that. Yep. So you just have to walk us through it a little more slowly and describe what numbers are where and what we're looking at. There we go.
So this, what I did in anticipation of this evening is I went through and reworked the 2017 rates that were prepared for the budget last year and calculated it based on what we're currently doing, and then also if we moved those over to taxes. And so the difference is, it's pretty close. The utility bill, if it is billed on the CRD portion, is a decrease. It would be a decrease in the average utility bill of $74.81. If we moved it to taxes, it would be an increase to tax of $75.10. So it's simply a cost allocation method, and as you can see, it's quite similar either way.
Okay. I thought there was another slide. Is there? Oh, that was it. Does this slide describe what happens for high water users and low water users?
Your Worship, what this slide shows is this is the calculation that we did for the 2017 rates again, and it just breaks it down between water, the municipal portion of sewer, and the CRD portion of sewer. And it's based on an average household using 115 units of water.
And did you do calculations for high water users or low water users, and what the proportion of impact would be there?
No, I did not. I just did the average, which is what we typically build the rates on.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Is there any questions for Ms. Carter? I know this was all. Yeah, I know you worked on this today, and appreciate the turning around so quickly.
Just one question.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
Just so I'm clear, that number there from 2016 to 2017, the CRD portion debt went up by 28.5%, and the municipal cost went up by about 0.5% each?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I guess I'm wondering if we, and certainly from my own level of comfort, and appreciate what you're trying to get at, Councillor Murdoch, just my own level of comfort, I'm not sure I have enough information to make an informed decision, because as we remember, that's when we go to Councillor and Mayor's School, that's one of the ingredients of good decision-making is good information. So, and I quite frankly had expected later on a more robust report. So this is, I know Ms. Carter putting it together as quickly as she could in the circumstances, which we appreciate. Thank you. So.
May I have the floor?
Yes, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. I don't want this to be a long thing. We've had this discussion. It's largely a philosophical question. This is not going to change dramatically how people's bills come. You can see it's on an average house, it's going up and down taxes and water on the same amount, essentially. This is really kind of, from my perspective, and the reason I'm bringing this forward is, to my opinion, that 28%, 28.5% year-over-year growth in the CRD sewer costs, and that's continuing, is putting more and more and more money onto the water bill. And I certainly appreciate the intent of user pay. I know that's been a sort of a piece of that. But that user pay portion of this, in terms of the sewer, has grown and grown and grown. So in 2004, when this first started getting allocated onto the sewer or to the water bill, it was about 4 to 5% of the water bill. When it got moved to 70% allocation of sewer debt, it was about 11%. We're at about 45% right now, and it keeps going up and up and up to the point where it's going to be probably in the 70 or 80% range of everybody's water bill. It's going to be just the capital portion of the sewage treatment at the CRD. Now, nobody's use of water affects the close to $1 billion capital build cost of that plant. It doesn't affect it. I&I and so forth affect things far more than that. So looking at that, and this is just my thinking process. To my mind, if it's a large capital project, a certain portion of that should be on taxes because it is outside the control of the user. And because this is something I'm moving forward now, I appreciate if we want to do a very fulsome study, there may be even a more fair way of doing this, maybe 50-50 or something. I just thought that was a model that was in place for close to a decade, and it seemed to be reasonably equitable. Just to go back to that, so there's a portion of that. It has a couple of effects. Obviously, it changes it, so it's a little bit more visible that the capital costs are coming on there. It'll make the increase in those costs a bit more transparent to my mind, but it's certainly more visible to people on their tax bill. However, it would also allow people who are being affected by this, because these are very large numbers. I mean, this is $250 a year currently that is being put onto the water bill for the sewage treatment capital costs, that it allows people to defer some of those funds. So if you're older and have a home and you have some of those costs, that $75, while not a large amount of money, going onto taxes does allow for that deferment. So to my mind, there's enough pros here to do it and to try it. It's not exactly it's not gonna break anything. I think we're pretty clear on that. But it will shift a little bit of the balance in terms of what individual homeowners pay. I'll leave it at that. I think we've had a pretty fulsome discussion around this table in terms of the pros and cons, but that's the reason I'm bringing it forward now.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Croft, please.
A question for staff, if I may.
Okay,
Is the sewer portion of this, if passed, would it be able to be deferred on the tax bill, or would it be an additional tax burden like we have right now that had to be paid in cash?
Through your worship, it would be able to be deferred. The only items that can't be deferred are user charges.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thanks so much. This is something that I have been advocating for a long time, which is why I was voted against the other way that we do things. I think it is a step in the right direction, and so I'm going to support this motion. I would like to see this implemented sooner rather than later, so I will be supporting.
Okay, Councillor Day.
Well, there's some new information that's come to my attention here. At first, I thought it was just an allocation issue, that if we move it, the cost to the tax bill goes up and the utility bill goes down. But the big point for me that Councillor Murdoch has just brought up was, and that staff has confirmed, is that should the utility bill or the cost move over to the tax bill, then somebody could defer it, actually. So that would mitigate burden for senior people or people trying to age out in their homes. So that's a big deal for me. Other than that, I don't really see any other issue. Even philosophically, it doesn't make any sense. But there is a very practical implication here. So I'm inclined to support this, actually.
Okay, Councillor, anyone else? Councillor Kirby, please. Oh, sorry, I think Councillor Zelka was next. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to support this as well. The fact that we now have the CRD portion being primarily fixed capital costs, where before it was a service charge, now it's more of a capital charge. That was enough for me to support this. But the new information that something that would help some of our seniors who can potentially defer some of these rather large charges on their tax bill is a motivator for me to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby?
Pretty much want to say exactly the same thing. That, yeah. It was to me, $75 one way or the other. In both cases, it seemed transparent because it's a line item on both the water bill, that it is a sewage surcharge, and that on the tax bill it was also well marked and clear. There was transparency. It was an equal quantity. Wasn't penalizing anybody truly in one way or another. But that's a strong argument that, you know, if somebody wanted to defer their taxes, that this is one less burden on them, $250. So yeah, I'd support it.
I wanted to ask just the question that you raised in terms of how it appears on the tax bill, and that goes to Councillor Murdoch's. It's visible on both, and I thought I heard Councillor Kirby say you'll be able to see it on your tax bill. How will it be pulled out in the tax bill that this is a sewer charge relating to the CRD sewage treatment? And will it?
Your Worship, at this time I'm not sure whether we can show it separately. We could look at doing that, but without that, at this time it would just be showing up exactly the same as the 70-30 split for the municipal portion that we already do.
Right. Because it's that visibility that I have an issue with, because it's much more visible on the sewer and sewer bill, and that's one of the reasons it was brought in. And I know every year it was challenged, but every year council upheld it since we went to that 2010. And one of the reasons is because we knew there was a sewage treatment plant in the works, and over time that was going to go up, and people needed to see that was where that was. It wasn't just hidden in taxes. It was actually on their sewer bill. And that created the visibility. And I think that's one of the reasons we did it. That's firstly. Secondly, by changing your water consumption, you could affect the charge. And that's what we don't have here. How is it going to impact low water users and high water users? And I think there will be a difference in how it will impact. It's a matter of who's going to pay and how we're going to do it. And so I think it'll have less visibility on the taxes. People will not have an ability to influence the rate at which they cover it, because it's no longer tied to water consumption. So there are some downsides, and I think there's enough downsides at this point and gaps in the information that I cannot support it at this point, because we just don't have enough information. Yep, Councillor, I think for the first time, Councillor Braithwaite? Or no, have you spoken already? Is there anyone else who hasn't spoken, who wants to speak for the first time? Okay, Councillor Murdoch.
No, I hear your points, Mayor, and I think the visibility portion is important. I would point out that 70% of these costs are still going on the water bill, so the increases year over year and the unit costs and so forth are still very visible on that. Again, I don't think this is a make or break thing. I just think this is a better way of doing it, and I'd like to try it for a couple of years and see what it looks like and see what the impact is. So that's why the very cautious approach. So thank you.
Okay. Any other speakers? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Kirby.
So if we approve this, would this be implemented for this year?
2018.
And through you, Chair, to staff, would that pose a real challenge for staff to implement something so quickly?
Through your worship, we're just going into the rate setting and budgets now, so if we were to make a change, we would need to know that fairly quickly for 2018.
Okay, any other speakers? No? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? I'm opposed. Thank you.
Move it.
That brings us to the end of our discussions here tonight. All in favor of the motion to adjourn? Against? None against. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.